the basic idea is that you have, at least in case of generators, we have rotating conductors in a magnetic field, and we get the required EMF out of the conductors. In case of motors, it is the opposite. This PPT essentially gives you another way of looking at both generators and motors. Remember that the signal generated is AC. We convert it to DC by using a commutator. Okay. Level of operation we've already seen. A lot of electromagnetism is there. Don't have to worry too much about it. The waveform generated after the commutator is unipolar, in the sense that negative half becomes positive half. Okay. This diagram I have already shown you. It shows you the generated EMF waveform versus the position of the rotating conductor, rotating loop. Only thing is, here I am assuming that commutator is present, so the output has no negative half. It is unipolar output that you are watching. Polarity is always positive, although it is not DC output, but it definitely is not AC. This is called rectification. As far as the construction is concerned, you have a stationary part and a rotating. Stationary part generates the required magnetic field, and rotary part has all the conductors that generate the required EMF. Lot of details in both. Magnetic poles can be 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. They are mounted on the inside of the stator. Usually they are bolted. The bottom of the poles is given an extra large area called pole shoe. It helps in improving the coupling between the magnetic field and the rotating conductors. The rotating part is in the center. It has lots of slots in which conductors are housed. And at the center of this rotating part, you have the shaft coming in, which supplies the mechanical energy, mechanical rotational energy required. Commutator is also shown here in this cross section. Its job is to convert the signal into unipolar signal. Okay. Brushes pick up the required voltage from the rotating parts. We have gone through this, so I'm going to quickly rush through this PPT. It was done by one of our own faculty members in ME department. It's worth looking at. The armature is the name given to the rotating part's electrical portion. This rotating part has both mechanical portion and electrical portion. Electrical portion is on the outer side, which has all the rotating conductors. That is called armature. Now, armature winding is the name given to how conductors are connected, and field winding is the name given to how conductors are wrapped around on the poles to make the flux stronger. Armature winding can be of two types, lap and wave type. In the lap winding, the two ends of a given loop are connected to adjacent segments on the commutator, while in case of a wave winding, they are connected to segments far apart. There's a lot of detail here. I'm not going to be able to show you all the drawings, but at least remember these words for now. Both types of windings have their own pros and cons. EMF equation, we will be deriving it later, but it essentially gives you a way to calculate how much EMF would be generated in a DC generator based on how much flux is being produced, etc. The field windings can be either separately excited or self-excited, as I was mentioning last time. That means they can have a separate DC source to feed them, or you can use your own DC voltage that you are getting to feed them. Both options are fine. Self-excitation slightly more complicated, but it is worth because you don't need a separate input voltage to excite the field windings. Field windings and armature windings can be connected in shunt, series, or compound. We have seen that before, and we'll be coming to it again and again. One thing I want to show you is that when we draw equivalent circuits for analysis purposes, it is customary to show the rotating part, the armature, as a circle with two rectangles on top and bottom. These rectangles represent the brushes. We assume only two brushes for analysis. There can be more than two also. Okay. The rest of the analysis we'll be doing anyway in detail. So circle means the rotating part. How much torque is generated if you are using the machine as a motor, that's another story. We'll come back to it later. What are the performance characteristics in case of generators and in case of motors? I've already spoken about generator a little bit in the previous lecture. Voltage regulation is one thing. How much would the voltage change from no load to full load divided by full load voltage, and entire thing multiplied by 100, that is voltage regulation. It should be as small as possible. And there are other things, output voltage versus load current, etc., etc. We will get back to that again in detail. For motors, the output is a rotary mechanical power. So the important characteristics for motors, and actually not only DC motors, but for all motors, are shown here. Torque versus armature current, speed versus armature current, and torque versus speed. The third one is a purely mechanical characteristic. It's very important. If you increase the torque, will the speed remain same or will it go down? Very important to know. Same thing, if the speed goes up, will the armature current go down or will it remain more or less the same? And same thing with torque versus armature current. I'm just giving you an idea of what we are going to be doing in detail. Okay, don't worry about graphs right now. We will be deriving them anyway soon. Okay. Now, one thing which I am going to re-emphasize is that DC motors are very popular in industry right now. DC generators may not be. Shunt motors more or less give a constant speed. Drilling machines are where they are very useful, and there are many other applications. You can see that right here. Lathes, boring mills, shapers. In fact, you should know these words more than I do. Okay. Shunt, besides that, series motors, where field winding and armature windings are in series. Series motor, although it is not a constant speed motor, it has very large starting torque compared to shunt motor. So there are applications where this is a desirable feature. Railway locomotives, they are electrically operated, for one example. Even the e-rickshaw on our roads, they use DC series motor. A lot of torque to begin with to get the whole thing started. Cranes, elevators, air compressors, vacuum cleaners, etc. They generally use series motors. Compound motor is a combination of parallel and series connections, so it can be used to further optimize the performance. Besides the continuous rotation, there are other possibilities also for DC motors. For control systems, you don't want a continuous rotation in the output. Instead, you want output to move a little bit to adjust to the latest load situation. That is an application where we call this motor as a servo motor. Also, there is another application called stepper motor where output is not a continuously rotating machine, but something that moves depending on the input voltage. Some input voltage in that case is generally a series of pulses. So for each pulse, the rotor rotates by a few degrees, by a well-known value of angle. This is called stepper motor. This is frequently used in printers and in fax machines, etc. There's a large variety of applications which are not mentioned here. DC machines, especially DC motors, are extremely powerful and common. Now let's get back to DC generators slightly more in detail. The basic principle, as we have already seen, is rotation of a conducting loop in magnetic field. I am taking a very simplified case where it's North Pole and South Pole, only one North Pole and one South Pole, producing the required magnetic flux, and one conductor in the shape of a rectangle with two ends opened out available to us for connection to the outside world. Theta equal to 0 degrees is the vertical position. Okay. The conductor is rotating at a fixed revolutions per minute, capital N. And if you divide capital N by 60, you will get revolutions per second. That we generally denote by small n. The EMF that you will see across the two output terminals of this conducting loop, which are small a and small b, that EMF will have a sinusoidal shape with theta. Okay. We have seen that in the previous PPTs also. Now, theta is continuously changing at a constant rate. That means indirectly it is representing time. So what you have got is a sinusoidal signal with respect to time. In this particular AC signal, so we use commutator, as I have mentioned again and again, to get unipolar output. And then we do other things to get it even more smooth, to get DC as close as possible. First thing is the EMF produced without commutator will have this equation, well-known equation. Okay, where capital EM is the peak value or amplitude. Omega is the well-known thing, you know by now, it's angular frequency measured in radian per second. Now, in one single rotation, the loop goes through 360 degrees or 2 pi radians. Okay. And we know that if the RPM is capital N, then RPS, revolution per second, is capital N divided by 60. So in one rotation, sorry, in 1 second, the total angle that the loop would go through will be 2 pi multiplied by capital N divided by 60. So this is the value of omega. RPM is easily related to omega by equation 3. You can always write small n as capital N divided by 60, and then you can write omega as 2 pi multiplied by small n. That's another way of doing the same thing. Now commutator, what does it do? You can imagine two half rings rotating at the same speed at which the rotor is rotating. In fact, they are connected to the rotor. But let's put, like we are putting a bit of a break between them. So they are not physically connected. It's not a circle. You are getting almost half circles. And you connect the two output terminals of the rotating conductor or rotating loop to these halves. Now, for the positive half cycle, the connection would be as shown. Small is connected to the leftmost ring and small b is connected to the rightmost ring. Now, when you enter the negative half, at the same time, these also switch their positions. What I mean is that A and B interchange their meaning in the negative half. So that compensates for the negative half cycle. It makes it positive. It's a very interesting way of rectifying the AC signal to get unipolar signal using mechanical means, not using diodes. Of course, in reality, we have thousands of loops, so commutator has to have these halves in large numbers. They are all mounted together on a single assembly called commutator. Actually, two things. The principal operation can be explained by diagram, assuming only one loop. Try reading it. Oh, by the way, brushes are the ones which are connected to these rotating halves and to pick up the voltage. Two fixed brushes made of carbon and metal. Metal is needed because the contact has to be conducting, but most of the other part of brush is made of carbon. So these brushes are permanently touching the two rings. The required voltage is collected across the two brushes. During a half cycle, the brushes are connected to the rings in a certain manner, and during the next half cycle, which is negative half, the brushes are connected to rings in the opposite manner. This ensures the voltage collected the brushes is always of the universal voltage. This is still not DC. So how do we get DC? Do the voltage? This becomes 5. write small polar voltage as EA multiplied magnitude of sin omega t, because now there is no negative value. And omega is 2 pi and frequency of the signal is omega divided by 2 pi, which is capital N divided by 60, which is equal to repeating for the sake of fitness. Now what? Suppose conductor in the many conductors. That would help in improving the value of EM. EM generally is very small if you use only one conductor and one loop. So to improve this value, one method is to use more than one conductors in the same loop. Even more important is that instead of using one loop, suppose we use a large number of loops rotating simultaneously at the same speed but displaced from each other by a certain angle. This helps in improving the waveform and in making it very close to a DC waveform. This waveform is not DC. Let's try to make it DC as close as possible. What happens is, for each loop, I'm showing only cross section. For one loop, which is in the middle as a vertical, the EMF generated will be the first set of waveform, the first waveform in this diagram. Okay, it's unipolar. Second conductor, second loop, because it is displaced by a certain angle, it will start its waveform little later. But that would also be a unipolar waveform. Third one will also produce something similar but shifted along time scale or along theta scale. So the total of all these EMFs that you are getting, if you do it mathematically also, you can prove that this total will have a behavior which is much more close to a constant behavior with time. I've not done the math, but you can imagine, just look at the envelope of this summation of so many waveforms. The envelope is not now varying too much with time. Minor variations are there, but the larger the number of loops you use, the smoother is the waveform in terms of making it a DC waveform. So large number of loops are very important in making the waveform of the output EMF a DC wave. And they of course help also the capacity of the generator for sure. So this is one way of justifying why we use in the rotor rather than only one. So basically, the split rings and the brushes together bring out an almost DC voltage for you. As long as the number of loops you are using is high enough. Now, coming back to construction, I have drawn my own diagram to illustrate everything, but I am using only a cross section. I am assuming only 4 poles. As I mentioned previously, the bottom of the poles generally is expanded to make it larger in area, and that is called shoe. That helps in making the distribution of magnetic flux inside the assembly a lot more uniform. Okay. The poles have windings on them, which may be externally excited or self-excited, and those windings are called field windings. The outermost part of the construction is called yoke or housing. It is generally bolted to the floor wherever you are trying to install the machine. The inner circle represents the rotor. The outer part of rotor is known as armature, which actually has all the electrical circuitry, all the conductors in various slots. The innermost part, of course, shows a shaft which is being driven by an external source to produce the required rotational mechanical energy. The core of the rotor is made of magnetic material because this helps in improving the performance. Iron losses and eddy current losses will be there for sure. To reduce eddy current loss, we use laminations as we did in transformers. Also, because of the rotation, friction loss will be there, windage loss will be there, and on top of it, there will be copper loss in field windings and copper loss in armature windings. Okay. Some description, because I've been saying a lot, but here I'm writing it. A static part produces the required magnetic flux. The number of magnetic poles is always an even number, 2, 4, etc. For small generators, natural permanent magnets can be used to construct poles, especially in examples like children's toys, where DC motors are used, but you don't put any winding on the poles because the power requirements are very small. Permanent magnets available in nature can be used. However, for large generators needing to deliver large powers, the flux produced by natural magnetic materials is not high enough, and electromagnets are deployed. They use energizing coils wrapped on natural magnets. The coils used to excite the poles are known as field coils. Poles are bolted or welded to the yoke. Welding is more difficult in the sense that if something goes wrong, you have to unweld. But there are times when welding may be preferred over bolting. These are known as salient poles because they are physically visible to us. Poles have specially designed tools already shown you that helps in improving the coupling between poles and the rotating conductors. Poles are made of sheet steel and laminations are in poles also to reduce losses. Armature is a portion of the rotating part of the construction. The mechanical portion of the rotating part is known as rotor and is driven through a shaft at its center. The armature has a laminated cylindrical cylinder built using a suitable magnetic material and houses insulated conductors. By the way, conductors have to be insulated because you don't want them to touch the metal anywhere. In slots around the circumference of the rotor. The conductors are also called windings or loops. They are large in numbers and can be series or parallel connected to obtain the required voltage and current. Commutator is mounted on the rotor shaft and is made from wedge-shaped, hard-drawn copper. Each commutator segment is connected to the ends of an armature coil. We have seen that there are two kinds of possibilities for this, and wave winding. Carbon graphite brushes with metal contacts to split rings connect generator to the outside world. Lap winding, here the ends of an armature coil are connected to adjacent segments on the commutator. In the wave winding, the end place. Now, let's try to mathematize the operation. Try to figure out how much EMF we expect out of a given machine. Suppose the magnetic flux being produced inside the stator is phi Weber per pole. Okay. P is the total number of poles, not pole pairs, but actual number. So P has to be 2, 4, 6, etc. Z is the total number of conductors in the armature. Capital N, let's say, is the rotor speed in RPM. And windings on armature are connected in parallel to improve the current carrying capacity. Let's say that the number of parallel paths is capital. Conductors on the armature is Z. So path will be Z divided by A. Simple. Now, each conductor cuts the flux. The total flux is P phi, right? Because phi is the flux per pole. Total flux is P phi. Total flux P phi, assuming that leakage is negligible and all that, assuming that leakage etc. is negligible, we can say that the total flux cut in one rotation is P phi by one conductor. And you know that EMF is rate of change of flux, Faraday's law. Let's forget about the minus sign. We are talking magnitudes here. In 1 second, the number of rotations is capital N divided by 60. That multiplied by P phi, assuming that everything is uniform, the speed is uniform, flux is not changing with time, etc. The total EMF generated per conductor, per armature conductor, is capital N divided by 60 multiplied by P phi, which can be written down as N P phi divided by 60, or P phi small n. Okay. Now the total number of conductors per path is Z divided by A. So to get the total EMF, you multiply this result by Z by A. We give the symbol EB for the EMF generated. EMF is essentially the internal voltage generated by the generator, and V generally is the symbol used for actual voltage that we develop across the out terminals. Because of losses, these two will not be the same. So EMF simply is this equation, phi ZNP divided by 60A. Right now, just take it from me without proof that for lap winding, the number of parallel paths is number of poles, and for wave winding, the number of parallel is standard in these windings. So this equation essentially helps you in figuring out the generated voltage, at least in open load situation. You will be given phi, you will be given Z, you will be given capital N, you will be given P. You will also be told that the nature of winding is either wave winding or lap winding. So number path, we will use these equations straight away. This I have already several times. Depending on how you are exciting the field windings, you can have either separately excited generators or self-excited generators. Self-excited generators can be again series type, shunt type, or compound type. Okay. Now, as usual, for each, we'll draw approximate equivalent circuits to try to predict the performance. Let's at least get started today with separately excited generators. Here, the field windings are, by the way, we represent field windings only. Don't get confused. Actually, it should have inductance also, but we are talking DC right now, So what matters is the DC resistance or the resistance of the winding for us from the analysis point of view. And it is being fed by a separate source having DC voltage VF. And the field current produced is IF. Obviously, VF equal to IF into RF using Ohm's law. Field windings are independent totally in terms of excitation. On the armature side, as I said, we use a circle to represent the armature. We show EB in the middle to denote that EMF is being generated here. Two brushes are normally shown. If there are more than two, we'll have to modify the results accordingly. The armature windings will also have resistance. Let's call that resistance RA, armature resistance. So the equivalent circuit is pretty simple. What you see here in figure 8 is the one that you will use. Actual voltage generated across the output terminals of the generator will be slightly different from EB because of RA's presence here. You can use Ohm's law, Kirchhoff's law, etc. to figure out the values. First thing, of course, is to figure out EB, which we'll be using equation 12. Equations are pretty simple. Sorry, let's go to separately excited. IF is VF divided by RF. I think you can see that right away. Ohm's law in the field circuit gives you that equation. Actual voltage generated will be EB minus IARA. Kirchhoff's voltage law gives you that. Right? These are the two equations you need for analyzing a separately excited DC generator. Nothing more. Now, for a shunt excited generator, things become slightly more complex. Here, you are connecting the field winding across the two ends of the armature. You see that here in the diagram. Armature resistance is RA, field resistance is RF. The current coming out of the armature is IA. Out of that, some current will flow through the field windings. Let's call that current IF. And the rest of the current will go to the load. Let's call that current I. In many books, they call it IL, load current. And they call the output voltage as VL, V load. In fact, even the symbol capital T is used. Terminal voltage, terminal current are equivalent words. I am not using any of those symbols. I'm simply calling them V and I. It is actually almost enjoying to try to analyze the machines, Despite the complicated construction I showed, the electrical part can be analyzed using very simple equations. I think you can see the equations here and you can see why they are there. Kirchhoff's current law tells you that IA should be equal to IF plus I, because at that node at the top, input current should be equal to the sum of the two output currents. That gives you equation 17. You'll be getting this document. You can always go back and look at it carefully. IF will be voltage across the field winding divided by RF. And voltage across the field winding is EB minus IARA. That's KVL. That's why I'm writing equation 18. And terminal voltage of course is simply EB minus IARA. If RA is 0, that means the armature windings have no losses, no conductor losses at least, then obviously V and EB would be the same. When there is no load connected to the generator, that would be the situation, because in that case, IA would be 0. Even if RA is not 0, IA would be 0. Or almost 0. If not fully 0, at least almost 0. Just keep in mind that if there is no load connected to the generator, capital I will be 0. But IA may still be needed. Some small value of IA may still be needed to supply the field windings. Okay. Generally, for practical cases, you will find that RF value is much larger compared to RA value. RA is more like half a ohm, 1 ohm type of thing. RF can be as high as 200 ohms or so. This is a shunt connection. You don't want to send too much current in the field windings. They'll burn up, Okay. For series case, I'm going to stop soon. We will not be able to finish this right now. In fact, next time I'll do some numerical examples as well to illustrate all this from practical point of view. But at least conceptually, you can start imagining that in series connection, we have got RA and RF in, and RF is very high value compared to RA. So you can see that the difference between EB and V will be very large here for all practical cases, where RF is very large. While in shunt wound case, RA generally not being very large, V and EB are different, but not by that much. That is one critical difference between series connection and shunt connection. Of course, you can write the equations as usual. EB minus, now remember, field current, armature current, and load current, they are all the same. They are all equal to I, let's say. So EB minus I times RA plus RF will give you V. And another complication is that brushes also have their own resistances, which I have been ignoring so far. Generally, instead of putting equivalent resistances for brushes, we have a practically measured value of how much voltage is being lost by each brush. So we have to account for that if you are given that value. If you are not given, just forget it. Compound wound is a very complicated case. Part of the winding is in series, part of the field winding is in series with armature, and part of that is in parallel. I don't want to write too many equations in this case, because each case has to be dealt with separately, and it's better to do it numerically rather than using equations. When we do numerical examples, we will deal with one or two compound winding